Hello, vinyl community. I thought I'd get on and tell you a little bit about myself and what I've been doing, this crazy hobby I've been doing. I've been watching a lot of videos lately about the Beatles and what people have in their collections, and I thought, spread the love. I wanted to show you what I'm doing. And kind of give me your feedback and your opinions. And I thought I'd give you some tips that I've learned for the past long as I've been doing this crazy hobby, expensive hobby too. So what you're looking for when you go out there. So I thought I'd start with going through the American version albums and how to tell if they're first pressing or not. And of course with the England version albums, you can actually click below or go on the YouTube and look me up. And you can take a look at how to tell the difference between like the first pressings of Love Me Do, the first pressings of Please Please Me, and so forth. So that will be in the next video I do. But I thought, let's do the American version. So to start off, to kick off, the thing that I would recommend the most is going for this book. This book has a lot of knowledge compiled by Bruce Spizers. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Love the book. It doesn't give you any prices, but it gives you all the information that you ever need to get the first pressings or second pressings or whatever. It has a lot of information, like has maybe some information about the butcher cover, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about all these in detail, but it's a very good reference guide to have. So I would recommend getting that. They are scarce now, so if you can grab one, please do. It will help you out, that's for sure. So I thought, first of all, we talk about this album, and a lot of people have a lot of information on it, which some are right, some are wrong. So I thought I'd just explain. This is actually introducing the Beatles. This is version 1 that came out, and this was the Love Me Do. You can see Love Me Do. So this is a true first version. It is a first pressing, which is really, really nice. But this has the column on the back, so it's not the ad back or the blank back, but it's still very, very rare, and it's still very, very nice find. And of course you could look this one up and see how you can tell the first pressings or the counterfeit pressings with the Beatles and the introducing the George Shadow and stuff like that. And the ring, the oval, the rainbow ring, how it's the color green is there. But there's a lot of things you can tell. But if you can find a version 1, I would recommend picking that one up. That's for sure. All right, second on the list, I would like to go through the Meet the Beatles. This one was their first album. Well, sorta first album. Came out 10 days after introducing, but Capitol thought it was their first album, so we're just going to say it's their first album here in America. So the way you can tell the first pressings of Meet the Beatles, which is a fabulous record, is the credit information. Now there's a lot of information out there, but what you're going to want to look for is, if you can see right here on the record, it says, "I want to hold your hand," and then it lists a time, but it doesn't have any of the BMI credits or the ASCAP credits. So that's what you're going to want to look for. I got an actual version of the record. Sorry for holding it kind of awkwardly, but this version has the BMI credits on there. That would be like a third or second to third to fourth pressing, depending on how many BMI's credits you have. So what you're going to want to look for is mostly the credits that aren't there. Now they only made, there's on record that there's like 20,000 monos they made and 2,000 stereos. When the Beatles were coming to Ed Sullivan, what happened was Capitol wanted to rush this album quickly as possible so it could get out into the American market. They didn't really bother to get the rights. So what happened was they just rushed it out the door, and then when they got the credit rights, they stopped production on those labels, and then they started pressing with the credits. So the credits for Meet the Beatles without the credits are extremely rare. Now the stereo copies are even rarer because stereo wasn't the norm. So what happened was they actually made more monos than stereos. So that's why stereos of this album are exceedingly rare. If you can get a stereo one, it can be worth a lot. It could be up there with the Butcher cover. So that's what you're going to want to look for. No credits on. That's what people mean when they say no credits on the label. There's actually no credits like the BMI or ASCAP on next to the songs. Okay, next on the list, I'd like to show you a little bit about the introducing the Beatles still. But this is a repackage because when VJ and Capitol went at it for because Capitol sued them for the rights of owning the Beatles songs, they could only release a certain amount of songs. So VJ said, okay, we'll just redo the introducing the Beatles and put them in different packages. So this is one of the records that I have. It's not a very good condition-wise record, but it is extremely scarce, just like the Meet the Beatles beforehand and the introducing one. This one is songs, pictures, and stories of the fabulous Beatles. And this one is actually on stereo. Now, like I said before, stereo is very, very rare with the earlier records. So if you can pick up a stereo version of the first pressings of the records, then that's what you're going to want to look for. Now, you got to watch out, though, because there is a lot of counterfeit records out there. Now, there's a lot of information on introducing the Beatles that you can find with the Beatles above the hole, above the spindle hole, the way that the color is around the label. Let me show it. Actually, let me just show you. See, the above the hole and what we talked about before. This is actually a first pressing of it, but the nice thing about it, it says stereo on it. And that's what you're going to want to look for, because stereo is very, very rare. I heard that there's only 4 pressings, not 4 pressings, 4% of this album that was made in stereo. So what you're going to want to look for is what says stereo at the top, or it could say, I have a sticker somewhere that says stereo, but it's rare to find one that has stereo listed actually on the cover. Now this one is how you can tell that if the cover is a counterfeit or not is the flap. If it doesn't have a flap where it opens up, that means it's a counterfeit. If it has a flap, that means it's real. So that's what you really want to look for. But like I said before, I can't emphasize enough, make sure you look for the stereo pressings, because stereo is, at earlier stage in the Beatles' career, is very, very rare. Okay, or another one on the list is the Beatles' second album. This is a great album. A lot of people really, really like this album, and I have to agree with them. They rocked the house on this one. And it's very, very good. Very, very good album. This one's actually in mono. So what to look for is, when you're going to look for the record, like the first pressings of the record, what you're going to want to look for is the actual record itself. If you can look on songs 1 and 2, they actually don't say the time. If you look on song 3, they say the time. The first 2 don't actually say how long Tall Sally or I Call Your Name, how long those songs are for. So that's what you're going to want to look for. So you can actually find the first pressing. It's actually on side 2. So, but a neat thing I kind of want to show you about this album, I actually went to a record store and picked this one. My wife and I, we said, okay, I need to get a second album because I only had like a third pressing of it. And I go, okay, let's just pick this up. Oh, this one's in a nice condition one. It didn't have any problems with the corners or seam split, so I just picked it up. It was about $15. I took it home, and then I did a closer examination of it. And I've got to show you what I found. I don't know what happened, but if you can see up here, this one says free promotional copy not to be sold in stores. So I was like, whoa, you gotta be kidding me. I just bought a promo copy of this? So, and it's true, it's an authentic copy, because the first versions of Meet the Beatles and the second album, they actually had just a stamp. And then they started, for the promotional copies, they actually started putting promo in the corner, either prom or promo or free, right up here. They pressed it, they stamped it right through the record. So that's what you're going to want to look for promotional copies and the first pressings of the second album. Alright, now let's go to the next one, which is A Hard Day's Night. This one is a first pressings, of course. And it's not very rare album, but what you're going to look for a first pressing is you're going to want to flip it over on the back. Now on this one, what you're going to want to look for is right up here. There's two things. Right here, I Cry Instead should be just the song title, of course, everybody knows is I'll Cry Instead, but they misdid it and it says I Cry Instead. That should be a norm on all the albums, but what you're going to want to look for is right here. These credits right here. There's going to be either 3 lines of credits or 4 lines of credits. They added a little bit more on the later pressings of the Hard Day's Night cover. So what you're going to want to look for to find a first pressing is the first 3 lines. There's going to be 3 lines of credit. So that's what you're going to want to look for. And on the record label itself, what you're going to want to look for is the song I Cry Instead on the label. Instead of, it should be I'll Cry Instead. Now the second pressings of this, they say are rarer, but I'm a person that likes to have the first pressing, so this one actually has I Cry Instead. So, but if you want more of a value, the rarer versions are I'll Cry Instead. So that's what you're going to want to look for on A Hard Day's Night. Next one on the list is Something New. Now this is the first pressing, but it's kind of hard to tell with the first pressings of Something New. This is a mono version, but what you're going to want to look for on Something New, on the record itself, if you look on song 5, on the East Coast versions, they're going to have Nicholas as one of the credits, but they're going to mispronounce or misspell his name on the first version. This unfortunately is not a first version label. What you're going to want to look for is Nicholas with an H after the C. Now on the West Coast version, which I'm actually currently looking for, is the credits. You know, see how they're in line with the spindle hole? They're going to be actually on West Coast versions all right here listed, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all moved over. So that's what you're going to want to look for first pressings of something new. The covers are going to be the same. They never modified the covers, so that's what you're going to want to look for on that, and trying to get a good condition one. So, all right, next one up on the list is the Beatles Story. This is a record that hardly anybody ever plays, so it's really easy to get in a really nice condition. I actually got a hand-me-down on this one, and you can see it's still in shrink, and it has a sticker on it, which is really nice. It's a first pressing, but the rarer pressings are going to be when you look at the record itself. If you look at the records itself, and it orders the ones where it has 1 and 2 on the, like the first label is on the, number 1 is on the first, and then number 2 is on the back, then that's a rare version. Because what happened is they usually put them like in jukeboxes, and what happened is when they switched the record from one to the other, it was easier to put 1 and 4 and then 2 and 3 on 1 and 4 on one record and 2 and 3 on the other. It's just crazy how that worked. So, but the rarer versions are going to be on the first, when you have number 1, the first label on the front, then you're going to have the second label on the back. Those are the ones that are actually worth more. The next one on the list is Beatles 65. This is just a standard issue. They didn't change anything, so all you're going to want to look for is the black capital with the color band. They didn't really change anything. The things that you can find are the covers from emerald green to almost like a bluish green. It's really weird. It's like they're different covers of different kind of pressings across the Scranton version back in New York, or the LA plant from Capitol in the West Coast. So it's just, this one's just cut and dry, really. It's not really a value. It's valuable to me, but I mean, it's not like it's high up on the list, but it shouldn't be hard to find even a great pressing in this cover. So, okay. this next one up on the list is just another standard. It's the early Beatles that came out after Capitol got the rights for the songs, because the VJ had the ownership of them until like October 22nd of 1965 or something like that. I could be wrong on the date. But Capitol started mass producing this album and taking the rights back. They excluded some, like I Saw Her Standing There, because they already put that one on Meet the Beatles. But this is just a standard issue, nothing more. What you're going to want to look for is the black label with the color band. There are some different variations on the East Coast and the West Coast, especially with the stereo copies. If the word stereo on the label is spread across or tightened together, it depending on what you have. But those are very, very rare. But it's just basically a standard issue. Nothing just cut and dry again. So next up on the list is Beatles VI. So this one came out because everybody knows they were spreading their Capitol was spreading their albums out, or their songs out to different albums for a more of a market scheme and more to focus on the singles that they were releasing. So, but this one's a Beatles VI. Now this one's interesting. If you want to know how to tell you have a first pressing cover, the label's going to be the same. It's going to be the color band with the black where it says Beatles VI on it. But how you can tell if you have a first pressing cover is you got to flip it over on the back. Now right here, Capitol started making these, and they didn't have they didn't know what the order was going to be in the how the songs were going to be. So all they said on the label, was seed label for correct playing order, because they didn't know what the standard order was. So what happened was they just put that on it just to kind of cover their butts. And then what happened after the later pressings of this album, they just got rid of that and put the correct order on the cover. So that's what you're going to want to look for on the first pressings of Beatles VI. And like I said, the label variation is basically the same. You look for the color band with the black label, and that's it. Okay, now we're going to go to Help. So this one is, the cover is just cut and dry. This is a first pressing Help. This is a mono version. Stereo versions, you're going to see something at the top that says stereo, new sound kind of thing. But to tell if it's a first pressing, what you're going to want to look for is not necessarily the cover, but the label. We're going to go back to the label again. So on the first pressings of Help, what happened was they didn't know who wrote the better end, because on the American versions they had the soundtrack of the whole movie instead of having actually the songs that Lennon and McCartney did. So what happened was they started making these labels, and they didn't know Ken Thorne wrote this song. So they kind of just left it blank. They didn't put his name on there. And then once they found out who he was, they added his name there. So the first pressings of Help, you're going to flip it over to the second side and look at number 4, the better end, and see if Ken Thorne is there. If his name is not there, either it's going to be a space like you see here, or it's just going to, this is going to be shifted up on the East Coast pressings. It's going to be shifted up, and there's not going to be his name. On later pressings, again, you're going to see his name right there. All right, Rubber Soul, such a great album. All these albums are great, but you know, this is one of the Beatles start making their phase, their new phase into new music. This is a mono version. Stereo versions, okay, the covers are a little bit different in the stereo. The mono are all the same, but the stereo, you're gonna have either the stereo right here on the cover, or you're gonna have it on that. See that white part up there? It's gonna be on there. What happened was Capitol realized on the stereo variations that you really couldn't see the stereo. Like, it was really hard to see. So they decided to transition and put it up on the top one. So what happened was they started making it after the cover pressings of this for the stereo were out. They started making the one and put it on the top. Now there's even ones where the transitional one where they have it both, which are rare and sometimes can go for a little bit more of the money. But what you're going to want to look for is if it's written on the cover for the first version of the stereo or just the mono like this. Another thing is you're going to want to look for is the label again. So let's put the label back up. On this, if you notice, it says Rubber Soul, and it doesn't list the Beatles underneath. What you're going to want to look for is this right here, where it doesn't have the Beatles. Later variations have Rubber Soul, the Beatles right underneath. So you can tell if you have a first pressing that came out on the first day of release, or a later pressing of the first variation. So that's what you're going to want to look for. This is actually a first pressing, and again, it doesn't have the Beatles listed. It has all their names, but it doesn't say the name of the group. Alright, I think one of the most interesting things to try to find is, of course, a butcher cover. So we all know the story. I'm sure there's many people out there that know the story in great detail. But this is the first variation of this record, as a lot of people want, is the butcher cover. This is a third state. So what happened was when they decided, of course I'm going to do a really short version of this. If you want more information, you could probably look up online. But what happened was they decided to have this cover, and it's not for butchering their songs, because a lot of people out there think it's butchering their songs. It's not for that. They just went to another photographer. His name was Robert Whittaker, and he was a surrealist. So they said, yeah, this is a great photo, and it was supposed to be, it's called the Submarine Adventures, and there's a lot of pictures that were supposed to be going for this album. There's a lot of pictures released, like John Lennon or George Harrison knocking or hammering some nails into John Lennon's head. There's a woman to have her back to the camera, and the Beatles were holding sausages. It was supposed to be as a representation that the Beatles were ordinary human beings. They weren't some godly kind of people. They were just normal humans, and that's the whole representation of this. But what happened was John Lennon, especially John Lennon, liked this cover and said, "This is our new album cover." So what happened was they sent this cover to the plants, and they started making a bunch of pressings, and they sent them out to the records, or to radio DJs, and some promotional copies, and they said they didn't like it, so they had to make the cover. They had to take a different picture and paste it over on the cover. So let's go on to the next one. This one right here is a third state, so I'm going to bring it back up. So let's go to this one. This one is what they covered over. They took this picture, and they said, okay, they destroyed a lot of copies, and so what happened was they decided, okay, let's put this picture over it. If you can tell, if you have a second state, there's a V right here. You can see that they pasted this cover over it. There's actually a V. And which is really interesting, I have 3 copies of this, so let's get a different copy. Maybe you can see it a little bit better. This is another copy, which I really like, because it's in cellophane. You can actually even see the sticker, how much it went for. But if you follow down, maybe you can see it a little bit better. There's a V right here on how you can tell. And these are very highly collector items, of course, because we call them back. So what happened was they took this shot, and many people tried peeling it over. That's why, or peeling off the paste over. So that's why paste overs are starting to become more collector items, because a lot of people are starting to peel them. But what you're going to want to look for, of course, besides all this, are the stereo versions, which have this bar up atop. The stereo versions are very rare. They made 5 monos to 1 stereo. So what you're going to want to look for are the stereo second states or the stereo third states. Very highly rare that you're going to find a first state, but you can keep the dream alive. That's not but this is a third state. It does have a little bit of problems up here, but overall it's a very nice peeled copy. And then what happens is, after those came out, this is just a normal 4th state, which doesn't have the V. As you can see, it doesn't have a V. So this is what you're going to want to look for. Another thing you might want to look for is, I don't know if you can see it on this camera, but on the second states, there's actually a little depth right here where the paste over. If you look very carefully, where the actual, because when they made these covers, there are 3 parts. the backing, the front, and then the paste over. So when the paste over meets the cardboard, there's going to be a little bit of a line of white underneath the trunk cover. This is the good indication that you have a paste over. See, on this one right here, there's no line because this is a 4-state, there's no line underneath that continuation of the paste over. But on this one there is. And then all of a sudden you see the cardboard. It's very, very hard. You would have to do a lot of research on this, but this is what I found. See, there's that when the paste over right here where the trunk is ending, it ends. There's no paste over that goes beyond this. See, there's the cardboard where my fingernail is. But on here, when you're looking at it, you can actually see it doesn't end. It still has the paste over, that's still white, and then there's white underneath Paul McCartney sitting, and then there's the trunk cover. Now this is only for mono pressings. Stereos went all the way to the bottom, so you might not want to look at that if you have the trained eye. The best thing to look for is, of course, the V. It's really, really quite easy to see the V. So, but yeah, enjoy that. Following up the butcher cover is Revolver. Very, very great album. I can't tell you enough. But I really, really enjoy it. And this is why this is the first pressing Revolver. As you can tell, this one's in shrink. This is a mono. So, but the way you can actually tell, well, first of all, this is a great one. You can tell if it's mono or stereo up here. But they both kind of look the same. But this is a very, a lot of people look for this album in great detail, like great condition, of course. So, but how to tell a first pressing is, again, you have to go to the label. So the label, let's look at the label here. If you can tell, on the first pressings of this label, you see it says Lennon and McCartney. What's going to happen is the first pressings, they put Lennon and McCartney, and then you have George Harrison, they put George Harrison's full name on there. So what they did is they revamped the label because they had George Harrison's first name, and then they put John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So the first pressings of this album, you have to look for the label, and it's going to say Lennon and McCartney instead of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So the first pressings are Lennon and McCartney. Second pressings are John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Alright, another fantastic album by the Beatles, of course, is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And this is a first pressing mono, with which the Beatles intended for it to be heard in mono. This is a first pressing. Now there's two different things you're going to want to look for on first pressings of this album, is the cover and the label. So let's go with the cover first. I have another copy of this. The first pressings of this album, if you go to the back of this album, this is actually a third pressing. The one in the frame is actually a first pressing. But what you're going to want to look for is the NEMS information on the right hand corner. See, if you can see this, it says a splendid time is guaranteed for all, and then it has all the rights in reserve, but then this little fine black print above the three lines, it has NEMS incorporated on there. So that signifies that is a third pressing cover. Second pressings will have, if you go over here to this side, it'll have a NEMS right here instead of on the right side. And then the fourth variation, which are extremely rare, they have the NEMS, I think here, and then they have McClellan, and then they have the NEMS, excuse me, it's on the side of the album right up here, and then they have the McClellan information here. Those are rare because they stopped pressing mono in this album late 67, early 68. But the true first pressings of this album won't ever include the NEMS information, which is this one in the back of it. This one is actually the first pressing, which it doesn't include the NEMS information. That's what you're going to want to look for on the covers. Now the records are a little bit different. I pulled the record out of the sleeve here to show you. What you're going to want to look for is the record. See, it says "A Little Help from My Friends." That's not that's not what the song title is called. It's actually called "With a Little Help from My Friends." So the true first pressings have "A Little Help from My Friends" without the "with." So I can show you actually the second pressing of this in stereo. Let me get the right side here. This one actually has "With a Little Help from My Friends." So that's what you're going to want to look for, is no NEMs on the back of the cover, and then you're going to want to look for is "A Little Help from My Friends" instead of "With a Little Help from My Friends." That's how you tell if you have a true first pressing of this magnificent album. Next one is Magical Mystery Tour. Now, this is just easy. It's a cut and dry. What you're going to want to look for is on the cover. You're going to want to look for includes a 24-page full-color booklet or book, and then the capital rainbow with the black label that we've been showing. But what you're really going to want, what the collectors look for, is the mono version of this album. The mono version is very, very rare, just because the new standard was stereo, so Capitol stopped making mono records, so they made less of these. This is actually a mono version of this record. So what you're going to want to look for if you want the collectability is the mono version, because it is very, very rare. But other than that, everything else is the same. Alright, next is I wanted to do a single, which was the first single the Beatles actually made for Apple. This is a first pressing single of "Hey Jude." Sorry for, it's in my frame, so it's tilted a little bit. But how you can tell if it's a first pressing is, first of all, the first pressings came actually on the West Coast, and I'll tell you the difference in a second on that. But what you're going to want to look for is there's no information. It doesn't have any George Martin producer credit. It doesn't even say recorded in England. So this actually just has "Hey Jude," Lennon and McCartney, and then it says McClellan Music and gives the number. This is actually the first pressing of "Hey Jude" on the West Coast. And then how you can tell a West Coast version from the East Coast is if you flip it, if you see on the top here, there's actually the tab. See how it goes in, there's a slope? That is a West Coast version. The East Coast version would be just straight across. So the sleeve is actually even rarer than the record. So that's what you're going to want to look for, is try to combine these two, because these two went together. The label variation and the sleeve variation. So this is the first pressing of the Beatles on Apple. This is their first Apple recording, I guess, if you want to say, or came out Apple. So, and then the next one after that was the White Album. And here is a White Album. And how you can tell, this is just cut and dry on this, is if you look at the number here, it's going to be embossed. First of all, it's going to be embossed right here, the Beatles. I don't know if you can see that. It's embossed. And then if you follow down, it's going to have a number here. This is a very, very low pressing. This is 14,808, which I really, really like. And that's how you're going to tell if you have a first pressing or not. But you want to look at the records as well. So let's go and look for the records here. Right here, there's actually errors on the Apple, on the songs. So right here, if you look, they list the song "Obla Di Obla Da" number 4. They should have hyphens in it. They list "Bungalow Bill." They just list, instead of the continuing story of Bungalow Bill, they have just Bungalow Bill. See, I'm going to show you here. This is the corrected version. You can see Bungalow Bill, the continuing story of Bungalow Bill, and then Obla Di Obla Da has hyphens in it. There's some others on the other side, which Revolution number 1 and so forth. But these are the true first pressings are going to be the air labels. That's what you're going to want to look for. And then there's even a rarer version. What happened was on these air version labels, George Harrison heard the mix and he didn't like the mix on some of the songs. So if you look on the outer perimeter of the record, the black the black outer rim, and if it's under 28 or under, that is a very, very rare record, and that's worth a lot of money. So this is not one of them, but you're going to want to see if it's in the etch in the wax outside of the record. Let me show you. You're going to want to look on the outside where it's nice and shiny. You're just going to have some trail off information, and if it's 28 or below, then you have a master recording of that, which George Harrison did not like, and he asked them to change it. So, and that's very, very highly collectible. This is not one. I think this is 32. So, and then, but it has to be on the air label versions of the records. So that's what you're going to want to look for. That's what I'm looking for, but who knows if I'll ever find one. Alright, and next is the Beatles Yellow Submarine. Very cut and dry. First pressing, and what you want to look for is the Apple label. There are some significance on the Apple label, whether it's a Stratton version or on the East Coast or the West Coast version, or even Jacksonville plant. Jacksonville are going to be a little bit rare. I might go into depth about the difference of the Yellow Submarine labels, but honestly, the first pressings, what you're going to want to look for is the Apple label, and that's it. It's just cut and dry. Next one is another famous album. I mean, that's why the Beatles are famous, obviously. Is Abbey Road. Now, what you're going to want to look for on the first pressings of this, of course, you're going to want to look for this little grate here, because on the later pressings they actually removed the grate. So you're going to look for that corner of the grate. If you can see it right there, it's like a little square peeking out. And then on the back of the cover, what you're going to look for is Your Majesty is not listed as a track. That's kind of like the secret song. If Her Majesty is listed on the track, on the back of the album, or on the record itself, it's not a first pressing. That's all. Those are the kind of clues you're going to want to look for, along with the first pressings of this album. So, alright, now we're on Hey Jude, which is a very, very good compilation album. It's never what the Beatles intended to well, just for the songs, Capitol put it together, or Apple. But how you can tell a first pressing of Hey Jude is there's two things you want to look for. You're going to look for at Paul McCartney here, where if you look at his legs, you cannot see, in this one you cannot even see his legs. So what they did on later pressing is they added a dye to his legs. So can you see? You can't even see him. I mean, you can see how the other Beatles, I know there's a glare on this, but you can't hardly even see his legs. If you were looking right at it, you can't even see his leg. It's like his shoes are just sitting there. But if you look on later pressings of this album, you can actually see his legs. They added a dye to it so you could actually see his legs on the cover. And right there, you can really see him right there. And another thing you're going to want to look for is on the label. When they produced this, when they made this album, when it was coming out, they had different cover variations, and it wasn't going to be called Hey Jude. It was actually going to be called The Beatles Again, and that's what you're going to want to look for on the label. It's called The Beatles Again instead of Hey Jude. Hey Jude was it's the second pressing of this album, and there it says The Beatles Again, and here says The Beatles Hey Jude. So what you're going to want to look for again is the cover where you can't hardly see Paul McCartney's legs, and you're going to want to look for The Beatles Again. Last album I want to do is Let It Be. This one, it's like I said before, it's cut and dry. What to look for on this is a gatefold cover, very, very nice pressing. So that's all you're going to want to look for. But what you're going to want to tend to look mostly is not necessarily the gatefold cover, but you were going to want to look for the record itself. Now there's two variations of Let It Be. Of course it has the red apple. The reason why it had the red apple is because it was going to be by United Artists, so they were going to release this as an official video, of course. So it was going to be by United Artists. That's why it's red apple. But for the first pressings of this album, you're going to look for the last song. It's Maggie May, This one has PD, and that's it. And they don't list any other credit by. But on later variations, actually list all the Beatles names after it. So that, for rarity, for first pressings, this is a first pressing. But for second pressings, that for rarity, you're going to want to look for the next one, because that is actually a rare version of this album. But just depending on what one you want to have, like I said before, I like first pressings. So this is a first pressing of Let It Be. So that's all the albums that I have. Well, I have more albums, obviously, but these are the standard US versions of these albums. Now I'm going to redo, or I'm going to actually do another one. This is just an introductory video. Hopefully it goes well. Sorry for the shakiness and the kind of the blurriness of the camera, but hopefully enough information that you can see and help you get started if you're going to do this crazy collection of a hobby like I'm doing. I'm going to actually do a England version of the albums here really soon, so you can tell, like I said before, you can tell the difference on Love Me Do, their first Beatles song, Love Me Do on the red Parlophone label, how you can tell if that's a first pressing or like an early verse pressing of the label. I'm going to do Please Please Me, the gold, black and gold, so you can see that. But there's a lot of other things to look for, so hopefully that you guys like this video. Hopefully it's very, very informative. So if it's not, tell me what to work on and fix, and we'll see if we can get some good information and get some good information back and forth. So hope you guys enjoyed it.